Do you want to share the screen?
Yes, sharing screen right now. Cool. Well, welcome to our presentation. I want to make sure it's recording. Okay,
Okay.
yeah, it is. I can always go back and edit it too.
Okay.
So let's start. 3, 2, 1.
Hi, I'm Christa,
Hi, and I'm Hannah.
and this is our presentation on the psychology of business. So basically, we're going to go over the overlap between the field of psychology and how it influences and impacts business, marketing, sales, managing. We're going to cover every facet, essentially.
Cool. So to give you a quick overview on what our presentation today is going to entail, we are starting with the introduction right now, and then we're going to dive into concepts and case studies. So we're going to give you a little overview about what concepts we're focusing on, and then finishing up every concept with a case study so that you can see how this concept works in action and in the workplace. Then we're going to talk about positive psychology in the workplace and specifically how psychology can benefit corporate culture and climate. And then we're going to conclude and we're going to do a little bit of question, answers, and input at the very end.
Okay, so the purpose of business, well, I'll start with this definition. So psychology is all about understanding why and how people make decisions and behave in a certain way. And so, business, sales, marketing is essentially the same purpose. It's to sell your product to others as frequently as possible to make the most money possible. So, the essence of the definition psychology is to learn about how the human brain acts and how it behaves and how we can take that information and essentially manipulate it, which sounds a lot worse than it actually is. But a lot of these foundational business and marketing concepts that we're learning within SCC, but also like a lot in college, have a lot to do with foundational psychology theories that were rooted in understanding human behavior. Sales is all about capitalizing on your consumer, and that's exactly what psychology teaches. So and then learning how we can take these understandings about the human brain and use them to benefit our product to make the most money, how these strategies can be influenced. Next slide.
So the next concept I'm going to be talking about is the foot in the door versus door in the face. So this is used a lot in persuasion and in selling something to a customer. And essentially how to get somebody to do something or how to get the audience or customer to do the intended action or behavior. So foot in the door is when you start by asking someone for something small. If they comply with your first small request, they will be more likely to respond to your next and bigger request. And then on the flip side, door in the face is starting by making a large request that the respondent will most likely turn down. So to give you an example of this concept in action, Stanford University pretty much did a little experiment where they had a group of women and they wanted to find out what type of products they used and what type, specifically like soap, body wash, shampoo, conditioner, things like that. And so what they did was in the first group, they asked them to fill out a survey about it. And then after the woman filled out the survey, they followed it up by asking if a group could come in to collect inventory numbers, I guess, on their products. And they found that a lot of students were more likely to accept the second request for people to come in and collect inventory and check it out in real person after they had first done the survey, kind of to introduce them to the experiment, things like that. And then on the flip side, the second group, what they did was they just asked, like, hey, can somebody come and collect inventory on your soaps and body washes and products and things like that? And pretty much nobody said yes. So that is just one example about how asking somebody for something like a small request and then leading that into a bigger request and sort of working your way up it's much more likely to be successful than asking somebody initially for a large request. So that is foot in the door versus door in the face. It also is, I always remember it just because foot in the door is like way to go. It's like catching the door so you can kind of make your way in, as opposed to door in the face. Nobody likes or wants a door in the face. So that's how I like to remember it too. And next is emotional appeal and marketing. So we're going to be talking specifically about just the color and emotional appeal and how different colors can affect emotions. So if you look on the chart on the left, it's really cool because it shows how warm and cool colors can evoke just different emotions. And I so specifically focusing, like, warm colors can evoke feelings of happiness, optimism, energy. Yellow, red, and orange can have attention grabbing effects. So if you think like a traffic cone or a stoplight, something like that, or caution tape, it's to grab your attention. So that's kind of one example I like to use just for those colors and the attention grabbing effect. But also for cool colors, they can be calming and soothing, but can also express sadness and creativity. So back to that chart on the left, if you want to just, I'm going to point out a few, but like red is, it can express emotion, passionate, strength, power. Blue can be comforting, confident, professional, trustworthy. Yellow is intellect, happiness, fresh, cheerful. So it's so cool that certain colors can really evoke certain emotions. And so this is very, very, very important in marketing. And one of the business marketing applications I always like to use, and just from studying, I found this really cool article that was all about how the colors you choose are really important, because on average, when somebody sees a person or a product, they tend to get a reaction and initial feeling of it within 90 seconds. But what they found when looking more closely at it, specifically with marketing, is that 62 to 90% of that is based on color. So color plays a huge part and a huge role in deciding if their intended message will land and will stick with the audience. So that's one reason you should especially pay attention to colors in marketing, and is just a really great example of the overlap between business marketing and psychology.
It's also important to mention before you move on that these were based in like psychology studies that have shown this. And also, just for the cool, sad colors, something that I think of to remember like what colors do what is, like, if you envision the ASPCA commercial, it's in black and white, it's super sad. So you're automatically like drawn to feel sad towards it. But if you think of like the opposite, like a tampon commercial or a cupcake commercial, the colors are light and highly saturated. So there's like even a deeper level to it, like on the psychological side, which is really interesting. And I just thought of, so I had to add that.
Cool. Thank you for adding that. That's great.
Okay, so organizational psychology. So this is the study of the structure of an organization and of the ways in which the people within that interact. And it's usually done, a company will hire an organizational psychologist to come in when they're noticing a lack in culture in the corporate climate, or their office, no one seems quite happy to be there. So hiring a organizational psychologist they can address issues such as employee satisfaction or lack thereof, work-life balance, sorry, that's a typo, and then decreased job stress. And so right now we're seeing a change in the corporate world, especially now with COVID, but companies are trying to foster, it's not so much you're in a miserable 9 to 5 anymore, but you're going to the office, there's a smoothie bar, you can do a workout in the morning. Like, people are trying to associate being at work as something that's enjoyable. And that's especially especially so because of companies like Google and LinkedIn and Facebook that have started to cultivate these climates, and the corporate happiness, I'm sure, has skyrocketed. I don't have statistics, unfortunately. But there's also another facet to organizational psychology. So psychologists like Olivia Myers-Briggs created this personality test, and it's called the Myers-Briggs personality test. And there's a ton of different personality tests. I'm sure that at some point in your college career, you've had a professor take it, especially if you're in like a career development class or a senior seminar. But these tests, on the pre-side of like a hiring process, these tests can be used to decide. So particularly for the Myers-Briggs test, you get results like ISTJ, ENFJ, which is mine, And so you could say, well, we have this position we need to hire for. What position or what personality trait, personality result is going to be the best fit, which is absolutely not going to work. So then when you get applicants, you can have them take these tests and it roots out the candidates that are not going to fit the position and then emphasizes which ones may fit better. Of course, there is criticism to this, and it's not necessarily like a rule of thumb or a set in stone science, but it can be helpful in a hiring or onboarding process, and just with like creating teams within a company as well. So those are some ways, and I've added the link if you guys want to take the personality quiz. It's really quite interesting to do, and I love taking it. So next slide, please, Hannah.
That's really, really quick. I just wanted to add, for anybody watching, there's this really awesome class at Chapman called Developing Effective Teams. And what you do at the beginning of this class is everyone takes this test, and then you have a number of different projects and assignments throughout the course of the semester, and you have to strategically like figure out what your strengths are, what your weaknesses are, and work with a team in order to focus on everyone's strengths, but also to acknowledge their weaknesses, but not necessarily see that as something that will bring down the team, but rather something like an opportunity to highlight another person's strengths so that you can all work really well together. So this is really awesome. And honestly, just having worked in a team in a setting where it's not like, oh, the person that does all the work is like the best person on the team, or the person that is really good at public speaking is the best person on the team. It really allows you to learn about other people through this really unique lens of, okay, like this is who they are. These are their strengths. These are weaknesses. So definitely
Use them. Like, how can we use those to decide where someone's position is? Yeah.
Yeah, it's so cool. So if you haven't taken the class, Developing Effective Teams, it's within the leadership department. Highly recommend. Super cool.
Also, I will add before we go on again,
Yeah.
sorry, I just keep thinking of things, but it might be crazy to think, oh no, like no interviewer is ever going to make me take a test, but I went through a 3-step interview process over quarantine, or 4-step, and I had to take this before I even had my first interview. So that was really cool and happened in my real life. So we're going to start talking about the psychology of a leader. And so there's a theory that leaders are born, not made, but people can have and develop leadership skills. So it is a two-sided debate, but when you look at the concept through a psychological perspective, it makes sense to understand it this way, because there are like inherent traits that are obvious among people who excel as leaders versus those who don't at all. And they're very distinct. And so you look at these tech moguls, like the pictures of the guys on the screen, and also there's no female representation, so that's my bad. That should have been better. But we look at these tech moguls who do, and like crazy businessmen who are doing what everyone else is trying to do, but somehow they have made it. So what is it that has given them that competitive edge, has given them that access to success that other people aren't as likely to do? So Tommy Robbins is a psychologist, businessman, and he created an article or wrote an article about the 7 qualities of leadership. And it's important to note that if you don't have them, you can develop these skills, but it's most likely that the leaders that we think of, Martin Luther King, these leaders that we look up to, had these from the start or developed them really, really young. So, I mean, they're pretty straightforward, but we'll just go through them. So energy, real leaders tap into their own personal power, which is also like their energy, to shift the emotional tone of those around them. So like you can create and establish an energy or a power around other people, which sounds like it's not that hard, but it's like commanding a room, that kind of idea, but it's a little bit more in depth. So it's like you can refocus people's energy, you command people's attention, and then you send them on their merry way, more focused, more motivated, more inspired than before. So emotional mastery, time mastery, those are, time management. Emotional mastery is you can feel a ton of moods, but you don't take your moods out on other people. It's never that people are your punching bag. And obviously I will add that these are very, very like simplified explanations for each of them, and they go a lot deeper. But so in time mastery, time management, we've been taught time management is essential in anything that we do since the time we were 5. But then ownership of purpose is one that is not as straightforward as the other. So I'm sure a couple of you guys remember that a couple weeks ago we talked about purpose and defining your purpose. And so that's essentially what this article is saying, is that to be a good leader, you have to know your purpose, but not only know it, be so strong in your purpose that no one can distract you or dissuade you from that purpose. And then using that purpose to help others to tap into what they're inspired to do, what they're motivated to do. And so that two part, you can't have one without the other when you have a leader. And then relationship mastery, financial mastery, again, pretty straightforward. For relationship mastery, to truly influence someone as a leader, they must first understand and appreciate the uniqueness of others. And that's something that we're seeing a lot in corporate cultures, is that, and especially in schools with inquiry-based learning, we're seeing that we're embracing different learning styles, we're embracing different work ethics, work habits. And so a persuasive and a productive leader is someone that is able to do this just like naturally and not have to think about it. And then finally, celebrate victory. You don't want to and we'll talk about this later too, but you never want to over celebrate someone's victories, but you never want to underdo it either. So it's like finding that perfect balance. And again, a perfect leader has that quality to do that almost innately. And then positive psychology. So the definition is to study the strengths and virtues that enable individuals, communities, and organizations to thrive. So how does this help us in a corporate setting, in a training, hiring setting? So Forbes set forth these 5 quick ways that you can bring positive psychology to your workplace. And I would be interested, I hadn't thought about this until now, but seeing how that changes virtually, if there are maybe new ways to bring positive psychology to your virtual workplace. But for now, this is regarding a corporate office. But so intimidation is not the answer. There's this stigma, or like this idea that's so ingrained in corporate culture that you have to like kill to be at the top, that it's like you have to step on others. And so positive psychology teaches bosses, supervisors, and even employees to realize that intimidation is never the answer, that you're going to get a lot more if you work together. And so I was in that same interview that I mentioned earlier, and one of their team virtues was, or their like, what's it called? Their company values, I think.
Mm-hmm.
And they were like, we don't step on each other. And that was something that I mean, I'm not going into a corporate world at all, but that was something that I'd never liked about the corporate world. So intimidation is not the answer. Happier employees are more productive and more innovative, which I'll just lump in with more positivity, fewer sick days, by introducing exercise. So these are 2 things that companies are starting to realize is so much more important. Like, my example has to always be like, at Google, they have a like smoothie bar, you can take classes, and it's fostering this sentiment towards work where it's not, you're there for 9 to 5 sitting at a desk miserable, you don't talk to anyone, but crunching numbers. So trying to train corporate life into not that anymore. So that can be done through introducing exercise, so that people get to break up their work days. And then obviously, like, people work harder when they're happier. So then again, we talked about in the last slide, celebrate victory. So kind of the same thing, but practice thankfulness in the right way. So don't underthink, don't overthink, but find that kind of sweet spot. And exactly with leaders, that's something that they know how to do innately. So then finally, embrace creativity. Again, we talked about how we're starting to turn towards a like new generation in the corporate world, where we are embracing differences. We're embracing that there's not one right way or one answer that is the best. So that's how positive psychology can influence like overall climate and culture for a company, which is really beneficial when thinking about your future in a company and what you want to look for when you go to commit to a position.
Cool. So, to give you a little recap about what we talked about during our presentation today, we talked about the relationship and connection between psychology and business. We talked about the concept foot in the door versus door in the face and applied it to a real example. So, the Stanford example with soap. We talked about marketing and color psychology. So, specifically, how certain colors can evoke certain emotions and how to strategically use that in marketing to get people's attention and to make sure that the audience is feeling those emotions that you want them to feel and that they get that first impression that you're hoping for. We talked about organizational psychology. We talked about the 7 qualities of a leader and how some are more innate than others. We talked about positive psychology tips and tricks just to how to make work. And again, connecting it to business and just the business setting and business world, how to make business and just work more enjoyable for the employees. So we provided a bunch of tips and tricks there. And so now we are, well, we know it's virtual, but we still, if you,
Ideally,
yes, ideally, if you do have any questions, answers, or input, we are here. So please, if you do have any questions, answers, or input, please don't hesitate to reach out. But yeah, because it's virtual and recorded, unfortunately, we can't take those at the moment. But if you do have any, send them our way. And then 5 questions. So we were asked to provide 5 questions about what questions might come up for people watching this presentation. And so the first question is how would you use what you learned about the psychology of color to your advantage when designing a message or campaign?
so thinking back to the emotional appeal, that part, and then the second one is what is it one sign that a company has good organizational psychology or positive psychology? So that can be answered with one of my last slides on either organizational psychology or with the positive psychology.
Perfect. The question 3, what were your results from the Myers-Briggs personality questionnaire? Do they make sense? Why? So if you haven't yet already, we both highly encourage you to take the test. It's really helpful and also just to be curious and aware of other people's personality. So if I find especially when working in a team, it's a great start to be like, hey, what's your code? What'd you get? Or even if not, to all take it and share it with each other just so that you can have the best team possible.
It gives you a baseline to like shoot off of, and also something that's interesting. I'm applying to grad school, but I'm using my Myers-Briggs personality questionnaire to kind of, or like my results from this, and the other one it's the Clifton Strengths Finder. But I'm a huge fan of the personality questionnaires. But I'm using it to kind of say, well, look, I have these results, and this is why. Like this is a testament to why I would be great in this position. I want to be a teacher, so I'm ENFJ or a caregiver. But so they are really beneficial, and they can be used in a ton of different ways. So definitely do that. And then the fourth question: can you think of an example from your own experience where you were drawn to a brand or a product because of its color? And I could have added emotional appeal. So explain. Pretty straightforward. Like I always think of tampon commercials versus like ASPCA. So yeah.
And then the last question is, which of the 7 qualities of a leader do you think you have the most, and which do you think you need to develop further? Give examples from your real life to explain. So think back to those. Think about which qualities you might have, which you need to develop. As mentioned, some are qualities you're born with, but again, some are qualities that you can improve on. I mean, actually, they're all qualities you can keep on improving. But
Yeah.
even if you're like, I don't really have that, it's not impossible to develop it from the start. So
And
it's
it's just a good rule of thumb to like approach your life to strive for those 7 qualities. Cause like time management, they're essentially just like very enrooted life skills that like we should have, but we need to develop. So it's just like a baseline, like, well, will I be productive in a workplace? I have time management, but I don't have this, but I do have this. And then you can see, well, do I need to develop those skills, or should I just make sure that I'm super honed in on these skills and use that to benefit you?
Totally. And so those are some questions for you, some questions that we hope can help inspire just more takeaways from the presentation today and to get you thinking about the connection between psychology and business. So here is our bibliography if you have any questions or just want to learn more about some of the topics we talked about today. And with that, thank you.
Thanks. Okay.